Okay, we're ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Housing and Economic Development Committee. We will begin today's meeting with the roll call, posting of the agenda, and the flag salute.
Member Basua will be joining us shortly. Member Flynn,
Present.
Chair Madrigal.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Wednesday, September 2nd.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, thank you very much. All rise, please. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item B, public comments on items not on the agenda. And we have one public comment today, and that would be by Pat Brown.
Yes.
Hi, Pat. You're live in the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting. We're on.
Yes. Well, I'm going to turn the TV down. Turn down the TV or I can't hear.
Yeah,
okay.
Turn the TV down, please. And
yeah, I just did. I just did. I have a major concern. And I think it's going to end up making somebody go up to Sacramento and have a heart-to-heart talk. We have a problem every time we put in a new development or try to. The developer or whoever, somebody, the developer, I assume, gets some extra money or uses less money by not putting in enough parking for each bedroom of each housing unit. And what we're going to end up with, we've already ended up with it as a problem in the mobile home park where I live, where people are parking in the street, in the park, and if the streets are narrow enough that if they have a big pickup, one of the big new ones, and then the fire department comes in with the fire engine, they can't get around them and through to the emergency. It's getting that bad. And we weren't having this problem until about 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's just getting more and more prevalent as the days go on. We have guest parking spaces, but there's not nearly enough of them for all the people with all of their vehicles, and most of the people who live here have 2 parking spaces, and it's still not enough. And we have found seniors whose family comes and visits them and just ends up living with them, staying with them permanently. And so therefore, that adds more cars onto the scene. And we've just got to stop doing this in Oxnard, because we think we're going to really get somewhere by putting in low-income housing, affordable housing, and not giving them enough parking spaces. It should be at least 1 parking space for each bedroom. And if there isn't, it should be a no-go. And the problem is up in Sacramento, and somebody has to go up there and fix it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Brown.
Otherwise, there's no point even building any low-income housing if there's no parking.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, it looks like we may have an amendment to the agenda. Looks like we may start with, actually, hold on, my mistake. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, continuing to item C, which is the info consent. And we have the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Member Flynn,
Aye.
Chair Madrigal.
Aye.
The motion carries 2-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if it works best, if we start with reports, if we start with item 3, would that be easier on staff?
Yes, Chair Madrigal, if we could go ahead and do that, that would allow for Councilwoman Basua to get here, which will be a little harder to jump into that presentation partway through. So if we can have Emilio come up and start with item D3, we would appreciate that.
Okay, sounds good. Then we'll start with item D3.
No, my glasses are try to thank you. You're pretty blind. Good afternoon, Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director. Before you is a relatively standard process under a unusual circumstance that is COVID. We're preparing to present an amended action plan for the use of CARES Act funding that was allocated to the Community Development Block Grant and the Emergency Solutions Grant. And so a lot of what you're going to hear, you're used to as part of the regular processes of those grants, but we need to do a little bit different or special anyways in process in order to allocate and program these specific kinds of community development block grant and ESG. So first of all, the CARES Act did allocate funding to the community development block grant and ESG. As you, I'm sure, already are aware, the community development block grant is specific to provide assistance to one of 3 national objectives, and that is meeting a low-income need or an area of service or a blighted condition. And the community development block grants that were allocated for CDBG have to meet those national objectives and in addition to be responsive to COVID in some way. Not necessarily the medical aspect of the virus, but some impact to the community that has suffered as a result of the pandemic, i.e. small business impacts or neighborhood impacts or things like that. We received, or we are receiving, we have been allocated an amount of $1,514,428 for community development block grant and just under $5.3 million of emergency solutions grant. The emergency solutions grant is a grant that is used specifically to address the impact or the need in homelessness. In this case, homeless plus addressing a COVID impact. So those are the 2 sources of community development block grant or of HUD funding that we received. We did not receive any funding from CARES Act for a home. So that would have been for the production of affordable housing, but that was not offered in the CARES Act funding. The allocations that you can see on screen are the COVID-1 and COVID-2 allocations. In CDBG is the $1.5 million, and then collective in COVID-1 and COVID-2 are the 5.3 million approximately of ESG. So the potential eligible programs, and there are some significant waivers that are eligible in these allocations that are not normally eligible in the standard allocations for CDBG and ESG. For example, the regular allocations for CDBG limit our ability to fund public service to 20% of the allocation. In this case, we are not limited to that, which means we can fund a significant more public service than we would have been able to fund otherwise. So the potential CDBG program uses that we are considering, that we are not bringing for you right now because we need to undertake a more complete process relative to amending a regional consolidated plan and an action plan, which we propose to do on the 6th of October. But so far, we're looking at a paramedic program from the fire department to provide for testing, increased response, their response to COVID, personal protective equipment, food share, the expansion of the homeless shelter in an effort to be responsive to COVID and allow for separation of beds, business response, impacts to small businesses that they may need to be able to open under the current state mandate for outdoor eating or things like that. Vocational retraining for a person that might have lost their job and is looking for a new career. Sanitation teams, anything that is allowing us to support distancing learning with the school district, with the community services and rec department, and then obviously in ESG, anything that is responsive to homelessness and COVID, i.e. the shelter. And we are looking at a significant potential allocation for a response to the encampment that has grown at or near Ormond Beach, near the Helico site. So we're looking at all of those things. Clearly, we're not ready to make a recommendation, and we're going to be seeking your advice to do so. But we need to undertake the bureaucracy that is set forth in the CARES Act in order to do that, and we'll do that on the 6th of October. Community participation plan, as interesting as it may be, the CARES Act has given us a waiver for the community participation plan. We need to do at least a hearing. We're doing that today, and then we're going to put out a notice for community participation, which is going to be very, very quickly because we need to come back before council on the 6th of October to present the amended action plan, which we are working on right now. That is the presentation. Mainly, we wanted to discuss that we have this funding and we need to undertake the process faithfully. We do have a significant amount of requests already for the CDBG and the ESG COVID funding, and we still have to do some outreach to community to finish allocating the final pieces of those fundings. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Ramirez. It looks like we have no public speakers on this item. So, Mayor, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, I do. This item, Mr. Ramirez, in essence, is just kind of an update with the involvement of the CARES Act, given the coronavirus response and how that affects, and then also the amendment on the citizen participation plan. But really, it's an update on what extra money, what potential uses can we allocate this potential money. Is that is my understanding correct?
Your understanding is correct, and we have a significant amount of the money earmarked, if you will, so that we will present a recommendation to the City Council on the 6th of October. For example, when COVID first hit, we had to expand the K Street shelter into the PAL. And we are allowed to reimburse ourselves for expenses for having done that. That is a direct eligible expense of CDBG and ESG funding. And that expansion was a direct result of COVID. So things like that, we are going to propose that we fund with these sources.
So I just want to say to my colleagues on the committee and to Mr. Ramirez and the city manager, what I'm particularly concerned about is the most efficient or effective use of this money, this CARES Act money, to deal with the individuals that are most vulnerable. And I do know, I think it seems like great progress that, the Vagabond appears to be moving in a direction of being, converted into a permanent source of housing for those that have vulnerabilities. Maybe they have comorbidities and or because of their age. I'm particularly concerned, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, I'm particularly concerned about pre-vaccine. I'm concerned about the weather turning bad, and then we have this situation very like trying to divide up the National Guard, former National Guard, building, and having to spread people out. That the virus, whether it's due to the other comorbidity of catching the flu, which doctors now consider a comorbidity. So people catching the flu or homeless catching the flu, and then obviously a surge in the COVID-19 virus. That I'm particularly concerned about how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to work that out. And there's a bit of a mixed irony here, and that is it traditionally in the wintertime, we're looking to house, however way we can, those individuals that are most vulnerable. But it's ironic that if circumstances are, and I hope it doesn't go in this direction, but if circumstances are that people have to be housed, that they potentially could become even more vulnerable to the virus. Maybe on the one hand, they're more vulnerable to catching the flu by being outdoors. I don't know, but maybe by being indoors, they're more vulnerable to catching the virus. So I have a real concern. I'm glad that Mr. Ramirez is updating the committee, but I'm not a person who thinks of catastrophic circumstances, or dwells on them, but it has entered my mind pre-vaccine, what are we going to do to deal with the most vulnerable populations? And I'm just speaking right now about the homeless, and I know there's many other areas that need to be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilwoman Basua?
Thank you. Question. CARES Act, is there a deadline where we need to spend the money before the act?
I'm sorry, Councilwoman, did you ask what the deadline to expend the funds?
Correct.
We have 2 years from the date that the action plan is approved by HUD.
I believe Councilwoman Basua is done. Thank you. Real quickly, Mr. Ramirez, I know that this money or this service is much needed, and as the mayor said, we need to be careful. So much can happen in such a small time, or a lot can happen in a short period of time. We saw this, while numbers weren't great, but we were doing okay. Right before Memorial Day, right after Memorial Day till right around Labor Day, we were struggling. Like pandemic hit, and it hit hard here in the city of Oxnard. So as you said, any help is much appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we need to take a vote on this?
Yes, please.
Motion, Mayor?
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I had to step away from the computer. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a motion on the floor.
We're looking for a motion from the committee to recommend this action to the council.
I'll move the motion.
Okay, second.
I thought there was already a motion. I apologize.
Member Basua, are you able to vote? I'll come back to you. Member Flynn?
Aye.
Chair Madrigal?
Aye.
Member Basua? Okay, looks like you're still muted. If you're able to unmute. Otherwise, we'll just go with a vote of 2-0. Member Bussoa, did you want to try to vote?
Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes.
Yes, aye.
Okay, great. 3-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on, we have the preparation of the 2021 to 2029 housing element and policy direction. And we have someone presenting.
Good afternoon, Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager, and I just wanted to thank the Housing Department, who is a collaborative department in putting together this report. So this afternoon, I'll be giving a background on where we are at with the housing element, and also I'll be covering some of the policy questions that will help us as we move forward with our 6th cycle housing element. And of course, Emilio Ramirez is here in the audience as well, and is here to help with this matter. So the background: the Southern California Association of Governments adopted will be adopting a final RHNA in January of 2021. We don't expect any substantial changes to that number. We received an update to that, and the numbers are roughly 3 less, but for all intents and purposes in my presentation today, you can assume the numbers presented here will be our final numbers. And what that means is that there's a process by which those numbers get final approval in January, and they've been vetted through different committees and departments and up in the state. So that process will be final in January of 2021. And then they'll release the final numbers in February, and they'll ask you cities and counties to prepare your housing element based upon those numbers. And then the housing elements are required to be adopted by October 15th of 2021. And you can see there's not a lot of time from February to October. And for that is one of the reasons I'm making the point of the numbers you'll see final in January, but you can assume that the numbers I'm going to present here will be the ones that we land on, although they may be moving by 3 or 4 unit numbers. And I'll talk about that in the next coming slides. The purpose of this conversation is to ask some key policy questions that will help us frame and write the housing element going forward, and to really have this be a dialogue where we ask questions of the committee, and then through the process we'll report to council in terms of what recommendations are made on those policy questions. As mentioned, this is the 6th cycle regional housing needs assessment allocation. We have a total of 2,902, we call them lower income units, which is comprised of extremely low, very low, and low. And then the unit counts, as you see, 1,523 for the moderate, and above moderate 4,092 for the total 6th cycle RHNA allocation of 8,529 units. We're really focusing this presentation this afternoon on those 2,902 units, which is an increase between the 5th cycle and the 6th cycle of 54 units. This got a little bit moved around in terms of order, but the purpose of this slide is to explain that the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development uses something called area median income, and it's established specific to each county, and it gets adopted in May of each year. For point of comparison, a family of 4, the very low income the low income category, which is 80% to 50% of the AMI is 350,000. So a family of four that makes that dollar amount or less between the 56,450 and up to 90,350 is considered low income. And you can see how that lays out then above with the different percentages in dollars, and that is updated to consider housing prices and CPI and such year by year. So the part in that we do with our housing element is that we identify sites and we look at the density. And I mentioned we're focusing on on something called the lower income sites, which is the 2,902 units, and we're going to be planning for sites throughout the city that can accommodate that number of units plus a 10 to 15% increase to take into consideration attrition and sites that don't develop in accordance with our recommended low-income category and process. So through our site evaluation and density process, we've been focusing on some specific areas through the city. One is Oxnard Boulevard from the 101 Pleasant Valley corridor. It's been identified by the state and by the Southern California Association of Governments as something known as a high-quality transit corridor. And the intent is to, through the state and through our local council of government, is to really focus housing along transit corridors with the intent of reducing emissions, making access to housing, making access to restaurants, transit, jobs. As a result of the work at the SCAG level, we received more housing unit numbers in the city due to that high quality transit corridor. We're studying that through a local early action planning grant that council approved us submitting for. It's a $500,000 grant that we're using to look at options for density and ways to improve that corridor. We're doing that as part of this housing element work. We're also looking at other areas throughout the city and evaluating density and transit. Some examples of that is the Saviors Road corridor from Five Points to Wainimi Road. We have the Public Works Department has a sustainable grant through Caltrans, and we're working with them on that corridor as well. And then we're also importantly looking at all of our remaining all affordable housing opportunity or AHOP program sites. And that is a program that the city has been that we used last housing cycle, the 5th cycle, as well as the 4th cycle. And we're looking at that site criteria and how feasible those sites are as part of another grant we received, which is the SB2 grant in the amount of $625,000. And I tell you that just to kind of walk through the things that we're looking at. One, we're looking at density and infrastructure. The image on the right is that high quality transit corridor area that I'm mentioning. From the 101 down to Pleasant Valley. We're also working with our downtown development code and design form-based code to look at other possibilities for housing in the downtown, not necessarily affordable, but just housing in general. We know that downtown plan approved 1,800 units for additional housing in the downtown. We're looking at what part of that should potentially be affordable as well. So this afternoon, there's some questions, as I mentioned, which will help us as we write our housing element. One, does the Housing and Economic Development Committee support utilizing 1,000 accessory dwelling units or junior ADUs to achieve the next housing element of low income RHNA, which, as I mentioned, is 2,902, and we're going to be going for a bit more than that to ensure that we have a surplus of numbers above the 2,902. Some things that are really important. Our prior housing elements did not count on ADUs. We didn't use accessory dwelling units to achieve our lower income housing numbers in the 5th or 6th, in the 4th or 5th cycle. That's a new phenomenon. The state has been very much encouraging those units and the allowance for those new units. For a point of comparison, we right now have 89 permits being reviewed for accessory dwelling units just this year. based upon the progression of units through the end of the year, we have an assumption that we'll be permitting 110 ADU units. We've worked with the state of California, and we're working with our housing consultant PlaceWorks, and it's very reasonable for us to assume 1,000 ADU units during that entire 6th cycle. And we have the documentation that we've been working through to note that those units are being rented at the lower income category. I know that there may be some disagreement with that. We have received 2 letters, and through our community engagement process, we'll be talking with the community about the assumptions for 1,000 ADU units, but we have floated that idea up to the state and through PlaceWorks, and we do have documentation that makes sense to use that number. And also then we'll be looking at infrastructure and forecasting impacts due to accessory dwelling units as we use the SB2 grant that I mentioned we received. ADUs, we're looking at sites with the SB2 grant as well as infrastructure capacity. So I love this image. I hope the committee likes it as well. The dots show ADU locations. That means those are sites where we currently have applications for accessory dwelling units. And as you may recall, back in June, we gave a presentation to the council with the adoption of our updated ADU standards to show how those can be constructed on a property, and we presented a variety of options for how those accessory dwelling units can be constructed. This is just merely one way that an accessory dwelling unit can be constructed on a property. There's many different templates, and we have handouts to encourage the ADU construction and to approve that over the counter in a ministerial way within 60 days. The second policy question, so just to close up, the first question is does the committee feel that the 1,000 units permitted through, excuse me, let me restate that. Does the committee support the city using 1,000 of the ADU units in meeting its lower income RHNA requirement? The second policy question is, should the city discontinue the AHOP program and instead rely on the state's default density of 30 units per acre on selected lower income sites? The city started the AHOP program in 2012, and we created that. We were actually the poster child for now what the state is doing with some recent legislation, in particular SB 1763. We adopted a program that helped us meet our RHNA allocation through that AHOP program. Many of the sites within our 5th housing element cycle had different densities between 18 to 24 to 36 dwelling units per acre. The state's density bonus was now applied on top of the AHOP density. And so what we're looking at now is a question of what is an appropriate density for our lower income sites? Is 30 units per acre reasonable? Is it reasonable based upon neighborhood compatibility, considerations to infrastructure, and based upon how many of those sites we need to meet that lower income category? It's important to note that with SB 1763, it raised the state density bonus above what the previous state density bonus was of 35%. So collectively, if we were using that, using AHOP on top of the AB 1763, it would in effect result in almost an 80% density bonus on subject properties. That would mean, in the example that I'm going to share next, that would increase on an AHOP site the overall density from 18 units per acre to 43 dwelling units per acre. So in this instance, this is an AHOP site, a real site in the city. The current zoning is C2, and it allows for 18 dwelling units per acre. Residential is permitted with a special use permit in that C2 zone. The AHOP program increased the density to 24 dwelling units per acre for lower income projects that are 100% affordable. With the new legislation, AB 1763, it added an 80% density bonus increase, which in effect will result in that being a 43%, that'll result in 43 dwelling units per acre. So the city can only count the 24 dwelling units per acre towards its RENA. Because of that, that is what's identified within our housing element. As you can see, that would result in 192 lower income units. Under the default density, so it's establishing a default of 30 dwelling units per acre. That's a density that was established by the state of California for different communities. In Ventura County, the default density established for lower income sites ranges by jurisdiction between 20 and 30 dwelling units per acre. This is a bit technical, and I'll do my best to explain, but when we were working through our fifth housing element, we looked at the number of sites we had in the city. We looked at that state density bonus, that state dwelling unit default density, and we determined that we would work and that we could use the 24 dwelling units per acre default density for our community because we had enough inventory in the city, enough sites available to accommodate our lower income units. We're now recommending to use the 30 dwelling units per acre and to not use and not implement the AHOP program because the AHOP program collectively with AB 1763 results in densities of about 80% on specific sites. Additionally, the AHOP program allows for additional incentives above what is allowed under the density bonus law. This density bonus by the state generally allows 3 concessions. Our AHOP program allows 1 more, so that would result in 4 concessions. So with that, we're recommending that we discontinue the AHOP program because in effect that's been replaced with that new legislation, the 1763, and that we rezone selected housing element sites to 30 dwelling units per acre. And that would be rezoning those sites to 30 dwelling units per acre to meet the 2021 to 2029 RENA lower income allocation. So the question we have is, should the city discontinue the program? And that AHOP program applies to 100% affordable sites, and instead just rely on the state's default density of 30 dwelling units per acre. The third policy question, are there recommendations from the Housing and Economic Development Committee regarding the city's inclusionary housing ordinance and the associated in lieu percentage? And also, are there local preference strategies that this committee would like explored? The city's currently the city's inclusionary housing ordinance allows 10% of the units to be constructed at the lower income range, or that the developer would come to council requesting to pay that in lieu fee. As you recall, we recently updated our in lieu fee dollar amount within the urban village areas, which are 6 areas throughout the city, and they're identified in our 2030 general plan. The urban villages are required to have 15% lower income units. It's important to note that the state of California Housing and Community Development Department does not allow cities to meet the RENA allocation through an inclusionary housing ordinance. So the ordinance is just one tool to preserve the units, but it's not intended to secure and achieve the RENA, the lower income RENA compliance, or we couldn't use inclusionary to fulfill the 2,902 unit requirement. During the in lieu fee update discussion, there was a request from the community from Barbara McArties to increase the in lieu fee and desire to increase the percentage. And to increase the percentage for the housing units. It's important to note that increasing that percentage from 10% to 15% or above 15% will increase the cost to develop housing in Oxnard. So that could be seen as a con, but of course then it also will be, it will result in revenue to the city for affordable housing programs and construction. And I would also like to note that in our report to this committee in January of this year, we identified that local preference would be difficult to require and impose unless funding from the city is leveraged with an applicant or a development project. So the final question on this policy question 3 is, are there recommendations from the committee regarding the city's inclusionary housing percentage And are there local preference strategies that the committee would like the planning division, the city, to explore? The fourth policy question, and it pertains to allowing housing in the business and research park zone. As I mentioned earlier in the example on question number 2, pertaining to housing and increasing density on AHOP sites. In the C2 zone, housing is permitted with a conditional use permit. Right now in the business and research park, no housing is not permitted. So as we've been working with our housing consultant and evaluating what's been happening at the state and considering economic trends, their question is where does it make sense for housing for mixed multifamily or mixed use zoning? Where does it make sense for that to go? If the city doesn't have enough lower income marina sites, one option would be to replan that BRP area to allow for lower income housing. Now we're still in the process of evaluating sites. Again, the question of do we have enough sites in the city for the lower income marina allocation is the one of the questions you'll give feedback today on is the ADU, and that answer to that question will help answer this policy question too, in terms of additional sites we have to identify for lower income in the city. We are getting a lot of inquiries for using for using commercial sites along the freeway for commercial housing. We know that some of the commercial shopping centers are dilapidated and they are in need of renovation. Additionally, changing retail trends really do make sense to relook at those areas, along with the transit corridors I mentioned that will go from the 101 down Oxnard Boulevard. So there are some key commercial sites that may be appropriate for housing for all income categories. But again, when you look at our regional housing need requirements, it's to identify lower income sites. So one of the questions, and additionally, there's a legislation going through right now, a proposed law that may require the cities to allow housing in all commercial zones. So this is an example of an area that we've been receiving inquiries from property owners and commercial brokers, and it's the Business Research Park between Rose Avenue and Rice Avenue. There's some underwhelming commercial areas. There's some vacant parcels. There's some dilapidated buildings, and we've been receiving inquiries about potentially putting housing in that location. A nice thing about the site is it's close to transit, close to retail on the west side of Oxnard Boulevard. In addition, there's proximity to medical clinics and the hospital. This is another area, as you may recall, this is the Esplanade area. There was a proposal for a third tower. That development agreement, I believe, has expired. There was discussion potentially of housing over there. And our current Levitt's property on the west side of Vineyard is actually currently an AHOP identified site. And within just a point of information, within the C2 zone, we do allow, as I mentioned, housing at the R3 density through a special use permit. So in the interest of time, these are the policy questions. We'll leave them up as we discuss these, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Mallory. We have one public speaker, and that would be Pat Brown.
Hello?
Hi, Pat. We're in the housing element
Yes.
item. Okay,
Yes.
3 minutes. Please begin.
I think I'm going to get away from the TV so you don't hear that. I think this low-income housing and very low-income housing is extremely important, okay, throughout the city, okay? And I I wonder if we put it in an next to an industrial site about the environmental impact on people's health. Because if an industrial area has a lot of smoke or puts out fumes of different kinds that wouldn't necessarily bother the people that are working there during the day, and then they get in their car and go home, but the environment there is left with the mess in the air. So that's the only concern. As long as they can be clean and without any exhaust or fumes or anything that's going to affect the people who are living there and the children who are going to be living there, because there will be a lot of very low-income families. If that's not going to be a problem, then I would go for it. One thing, though, you got to have plenty of parking for all of this very low income. And they actually need more parking than people that are well off. And the reason is because as they have to go out to the farms, and one person in a family goes to one farm, and then another person in a family goes to another farm, and they're changing out places where they're working all the time. So there's no way to control getting there and getting home other than to have their own automobiles. So we've just got to keep that in mind. Okay? And so that's at least one car for each bedroom. And if it's a unit that doesn't have a bedroom, it's just a one room with a bathroom and the kitchenette in the center room, then that's one car there because there's going to be somebody sleeping there. So one person sleeping there is a car. So anyway, that's my comments, but I do feel that we need it all over town. I feel that we need it everywhere. If it's environmentally safe for children to be brought up in it, and that we can be sued if a child becomes ill and so forth, the city can be sued for having put that family in there. And so that should be left out. We don't want any lawsuits. So anyway, that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It looks like we have no other public speakers. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's pretty overwhelming looking at this housing element. And I know that every city and every county is going to, is faced with a very similar thing. I feel very strongly about the production of housing overall. Mr. Chair, your argument about the Fisherman's Wharf project was, overall, we need housing. And although I didn't agree that that's where the housing should be, or at least that amount of housing, you're absolutely correct. We need housing, and we need housing in a big way. What makes this also very difficult is that it depends on where that housing is built and what type of infrastructure is provided or amenities for that housing. Because if it's not done in a way that's where the infrastructure is provided and it deals with parking, like Ms. Brown said, and the traffic, it is immensely unpopular with the people. I think we've all seen that. There's a lot of opposition to housing of all kinds, not just against affordable housing, but against market rate housing. So with that said, I want to just say once again, to contextualize this and then get right into the 4 policy questions that were being asked, just over 1,000 units that were required to build in this 8-year cycle is, to contextualize this, is 2/3 of Wagon Wheel. So the Wagon Wheel redevelopment project is 1,500 homes. This requirement, what the state is asking us to do, is just for affordable housing. They're asking us to produce 2/3 of a Wagon Wheel. And Wagon Wheel has been a project, I think, 20 years in the making. So I'm not altogether certain what the state is thinking in that context, but it's going to be just next to impossible to achieve. And I think, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, that if we're going to set targets, we should really be earnest about trying to reach those targets. And that's why I'm talking about this. The other thing is that with the lower income housing, I think I broke it down. It's 362 units a year. Well, I just called on this. The Gateway Apartments at 5 Points are 240 units. So those 240 units are exactly 2/3 of what the requirement is in this current housing element. So if we built that 240 unit type complex at 5 Points, that's only meeting that's every year. That is just meeting 2/3 of the requirement that we build these 362 affordable units. And so what am I saying? If we built a 5 Points project every year and a wagon wheel every year, we are, maybe it's a break-even situation, but in essence, what we're looking at is having to build a wagon wheel in a Gateway Apartments complex or complexes or development every single year. So that's overwhelming. And I've never seen anything like it. I know we're way behind in housing. The governor is very ambitious about building, I believe it's 3.5 million units in 5 years. And so it is a very difficult thing to do. Let me get into the policy questions. As you know, I support ADUs, but I support ADUs with parking. I'm not a supporter of the junior ADUs, and especially because there's no parking. But if we have a decision to make and the governor is going to start really penalizing cities, I doubt Oxnard would be penalized. But if cities are going to be penalized for not meeting these targets, why wouldn't we use everything at our disposal to meet these targets? We want to be earnest about this. We want to say, look, we got a realistic plan that Ms. Mallory just presented to us. So I support very strongly utilizing the 1,000 ADUs. I don't even want to talk about junior ADUs, but I support the 1,000 ADUs to meet our 2902 lower income RENA numbers. So that's number one. Number two, should the city discontinue AHOP and instead go on the 30 units per acre for density? Yes. I had real problems with AHOP to begin with. If you contextualize that in the context of when Dr. Williamson put that through, I wasn't happy with it because I thought that the Planning Commission and the City Council would have had more say in these AHOP, all Affordable Housing Opportunity Program. That's what it stands for, if I'm not mistaken. I thought that the Planning Commission and the City Council still had a say in those, where those went and how they would do it. The fact that as long as somebody met these requirements, the City Council would not have a say in it, nor the Planning Commission. And that's, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, for a city that is proactive about building affordable housing. So I didn't support that concept of not having that right. And as you might know, in Governor Brown's last year of office, he tried to connect the budget passage with this AHOP requirement, AHOP-like requirement for the whole state. And there was a revolt all across the state, even amongst the democratically controlled legislature, and that was not approved because they wanted city councils and planning commissions and democracy to work. I don't think it's democratic otherwise. So I support discontinuing AHOP and going with the 30 units per acre. Third, are there recommendations from the HEDC regarding the city's inclusionary housing ordinance in lieu of percentage? Obviously, we want to get more money per unit. I think it's $5,000, if I'm not mistaken, for a single family home. I could be completely wrong. But of course, we want to get more money for that. I don't really have a basis about the market and what is a fair deal on including in the inclusionary ordinance, what that in lieu of percentage would be. And then it says, so I don't know about that. I would just say that we don't want to do anything that's going to discourage it'll make the production of housing more expensive, I think Ms. Mallory said, but I'm for a compromise, right? So what we have right now, I don't think there's anyone that can disagree that it's too low, but I think it has to be market-based. We have to figure out what that right balance is. And then it says, are there local preference strategies that HEDC would like to explore? Ms. Mallory, could you elaborate on that? I think I understand what that means. Can you tell me what that is again? The local preference strategy, what that is?
Strategy had to deal with, there was a question from this committee, could the city require that units be specifically targeted to Oxnard residents? And there's some language within the inclusionary ordinance that does speak to that, encourages that. Through our analysis through the city attorney's office, it was recommended, or I'm sorry, it was determined that we can require local preference when we have, I'm going to use the word skin in the game, when we have money that we're putting towards a project, we can do that, as well as if a project has a development agreement. So, so those are the two situations where we can support and encourage local preference for our residents. So the question is, are there other strategies? And maybe Mr. Roselle has anything to add to that. No, he's shaking his head. So.
Okay. Well, that's what I thought it meant. And Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, I strongly support a local preference. I mean, why the dickens will we be going to such an extent to build this housing at affordable rates and the recipients aren't people from Oxnard? We need to take care of our people. I think that's, anyway, that's a very reasonable thought. So yes, I strongly support a local preference. And number 4, should the city adopt a plan or program to encourage housing in the BRP zone? Here's the bottom line about all of this. If we want to wipe out a shopping center complex because the nature of retail has been changing and it's only been accelerated because of COVID-19, and we want to take away that strip mall or whatever it is, and most of them are not particularly aesthetically pleasing. If we want to do that and we want to replace that with housing, I'm a real strong advocate of that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But this idea of mixing in housing without real parking requirements in a BRP zone or any zone for that matter, where there are businesses that are operating, and the fact that you'd have exacerbated parking problems. And we just think about the Victoria Avenue project, right, with the 26, 30, 35 cars lined up on Victoria. And I think that's dangerous, by the way. I mean, I know why it was done, but we don't want that situation to magnify the already strained parking issues. And we don't want to chase in a BRP zone or any commercial zone. We don't want to chase away businesses. We want more businesses, and we want a housing balance. And I'll end, Mr. Chair, with a remark, with just a comment. In Europe and in Germany and many other countries, at the turn of the century, they had this concentric planning. And the concentric planning, in essence, is that if you have a facility where people can work, and if you're going to build housing and it's not going to harm them, it's not harmful, that facility in any way, for people to live next to that facility. If people are if it's kind of a contained unit or package, and I don't know how exactly that's done, but then maybe it makes sense that you have a place of employment. And what a concept that people, this is the whole thing behind these 6 areas of more density, throughout the city, that we would have individuals being able to walk to work, not have to get into a car. How about building a school there too? So a mom or a dad can walk their child to school. There's not all this craziness with all these automobiles. So I think I might add that I think I would ask Ms. Mallory and the planning staff for us to really kind of up the game when it comes to these types of concepts. If we want to convert BRP zone land for housing purposes, I'm not against it if it's a concept like I just mentioned, but I'm not supportive of that unless it's the exclusive use of a BRP or a commercial zone. And the last thing, Ms. Mallory, I wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, because I put a lot of thought into these 4 items, maybe not enough, but anyway, I put a considerable amount of time into it, kind of thinking about it. Miss Mallory, is there going to be more if we include the ADUs as part of our 1,000 number to meet the 2902? Is that going to place a lot more pressure on us to make exceptions? Because right now, there are restrictions. Those might eventually be lifted by the state, but is that going to really put us in a precarious situation when it comes to compromising our standards about approving the ADUs simply because now it's part of the housing element?
Mayor, ADUs right now, provided they comply with the requirements stipulated by the state, we have no ability to deny them. They're ministerial, and that means that they're reviewed by staff. It doesn't go to a public hearing unless they go above a certain threshold that is established in our ordinance. So really, in effect, the ADUs are something that the state has been pushing down. And so if it doesn't comply with the requirements, then it would be reviewed through a special use permit that would go to the Planning Commission.
Now, I was aware of that, but I thought, and maybe this preceded some of the state law changes because they're happening so quickly, Miss Mallory. I thought that we had, of the applications that we had, that some of those applications were turned down. Has that changed now because of the state law?
There were some applications where the applicant chose not to comply with the ordinance, and so we advised them that they had to apply for a special use permit. Or we had a few situations where we had applicants who were reviewing or were processing their permit through the city, and it wasn't the streamlined 60-day review. And in that review process, the standards changed. And so in that instance, they made a change to their application to respond to the new state requirements.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the extra time, and Committee Member Basua. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Basua.
Thank you for the presentation. That was a lengthy presentation. So I'm just going to go straight to your policy questions. Number one, I'm not sure that using 1,000 ADUs is actually something that we can accomplish, nor am I too comfortable with that big amount. I would like to see it reduced. I think it's a lot in order for us to meet these numbers, and to consider that these 1,000 ADUs have to go to low income families. How are we going to determine that?
Councilmember, in terms of how we determine if those are affordable, we first off, when they file their application, they are specifying on there that the income category at which they envision renting that ADU or junior ADU. We keep a list of that. We track it, and we have been finding that the units that we've permitted thus far are being rented at the lower income category.
Are we giving anything like lower fees for people that are renting these ADUs to lower income families? I mean, are we checking continuously, or is it just something that it gets put on an application and then we just assume it's being done?
Councilmember, we're not reducing fees or waiving any fees for them to construct a lower income ADU. And there is a condition of approval that it be rented to that income category. And we did also have yearly reporting as well.
Okay. Yeah, my personal opinion is that 1,000 ADUs is too much. I would really like to see that number reduced. To be honest, I even think 750 ADUs is a lot. And that is my opinion. Number two, should the city discontinue AHOP? I do not have a problem with that. And I do have a question though in regards to the density bonuses. In my time on the council, I have noticed that the few projects that has come to the council, the density bonuses have been more on the south side. Ms. Mallory, do you have anything indicating where these density bonuses have been over the years, like a map, sort of what you just showed us for the ADU maps in Oxnard?
Well, Councilmember, I don't have a map that identifies where those density bonus requests are. Having said that, through our project tracking sheet, we could bring up that summary of where applicants have applied for a density bonus request, and we could include that as a map in this matter going before the council. That we could easily pull that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. And, again, in regards to, and again, if AHOP goes away, it's really no big deal. My concern is, just like Mayor said, is the parking. It appears that we continue to do density built units in areas that are all very, very dense, and parking is just horrendous. So that's a concern, but I understand that we can't, we have limitations. But as far as AHOP being discontinued, I am fine with that. Number 3, let's see, city's inclusionary housing ordinance and lieu percentage. I would actually I would prefer that we have local preferences. I agree with the mayor. We should try to take care of our Oxnard residents first. I know that is a lot of work, but I would really like to see this local preference go into effect. And in regards to number 4, should cities adopt a plan or a program to encourage housing? With the way technology and Amazon and everything else, the way we're doing our shopping nowadays, I do see where shopping centers are at some point, not all, some shopping centers will become obsolete. And there might be a need to rezone a lot of what we have now. So I'm okay with that. Again, I know parking is going to be an issue, but I would support the rezoning. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess we could be here for a long time talking about this. And the only thing I'll say outside of these 4 answering these 4 questions is, have we taken into consideration anything that the state may change regarding housing post-COVID? I know that we are struggling, and if you look at COVID numbers, not just here in the county, but throughout the state, you have the higher density communities who are being affected predominantly over other areas in the state. So, I know that in recent years, the density numbers have kept going up, but does anyone possibly see maybe those numbers coming down simply because of the current pandemic?
Councilmember, the regional housing needs numbers that we have before us this evening, I don't envision those will change. We don't, as a department, envision that those will change. We do keep our eye on legislation that is proposed and being considered and then passed in Sacramento that may impact the housing element. And at this point, I'm not aware of there being any COVID-related RENA legislation proposed or adopted that would impact the numbers before you this afternoon.
Okay, no, thank you. I know probably numbers won't be affected right now. I'm just thinking about more long term where, you have your normal cities, normal being the cities that always go out of their way to not meet the RENA numbers or not even try. And they could possibly use this as an excuse to not build. I could possibly talk about this further when it goes to the entire council, but for now, let me get back to answering the particular questions. The ADUs and the junior ADUs, I guess 1,000 seems fair, although agreeing with Councilwoman Basua, I don't think it'll possibly be doable. But, if we look at things how they are, we could probably put down 1,000 ADUs for right now. As far as the second question goes, I'm fine with discontinuing AHOP. I believe we could go to the state's default density of 30 units per acre. Question 3 regarding the city's inclusionary housing ordinance in lieu percentage and local preference. I believe that, yes, I agree with everybody else. I'm all for local preference when applicable. At the same time, knowing this, we do know that then the city will have to get involved and put in, money. That's realistically where it's going to fall. So where applicable, then yes, I agree with local preference strategies. And then the last question, the BRP zones, retail is ever changing. I know that mixed use, same thing with business. I actually like the mayor's idea. If it can work, it'll be great if someone can go to work walking and they could actually drop off their kids walking to school on the way there. That would be great, and it avoids the headaches that is not only parking but traffic at pretty much all our schools here in the city when they are in session. But yes, we needed to kind of get ahead of the game and see where the retail business is going to go, and be cutting edge and try to find new ways to not only meet our need of housing, but at the same time, know for a fact that not all retail is going to survive in the not so near future. That's it. Thank you. Do we need a motion, or is this just going to go to the rest of the council at a later date?
Council members, no motion is needed. This will just be communicated to council at a later date. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now moving on to our last item for the afternoon or early evening, and it's a part of the Community Development Department, and the subject is Cannabis Equity Program and Cannabis Cultivation.
Good afternoon. Let me just get my documents. Here we go. This afternoon, early evening, we're going to be talking about the Cannabis Equity Program and also a question pertaining to cannabis cultivation within the city. I also have our consultant with HDL on the line, David McPherson, who's been instrumental in assisting with the financials you see in this report. And he'll be available to answer any questions on that, as is the Assistant Chief, Eric Sonstegard, who's here to jump in and answer any questions you may have. With that, I'm just going to jump into some background. In July of 30th of 2019, the City Council took action to allow 8 retail dispensaries and 8 manufacturers, cannabis manufacturers and dispensaries within the city. And the feedback back in July was to hold off to hold actually 2 of the applications for retail dispensaries, and to use those or reserve those 2 licenses for local residents or local applicants. Additionally, council's input was to hold 3 of the manufacturing licenses for local applicants as well. Further, the feedback then was for year 2 with those 2 dispensary permits and 3 manufacturing permits that would be going to local residents or organizations. In year 2, the city would be developing that detailed, robust cannabis equity program, and then we would report back to council on that equity program towards the end of year 2. Then the council's direction, as also in July of 2019, was years 3 and 4 to allow additional retail dispensaries based upon conceptual market growth. Consider what there was in terms of support to go above the 8 retail licenses, to consider 6 retail applications for year 3, and then 4 dispensary permits in year 5. And then to conceptually consider allowing additional cannabis manufacturing uses beyond based upon the cannabis equity program and based upon staff's analysis and determinations if there was a feasible market. Also in July of 2019, the council directed staff to conduct meetings with the cannabis industry and interested parties to discuss our equity options and to get their feedback. We did welcome the committee. We did welcome the community's input on that process. We had robust meetings and phone calls and surveys, and we'll talk about that. I'll talk about that in subsequent slides. Also in November of 2018, the voters approved a cannabis tax, which would go to generate revenue specifically for the city's general fund. And again, based upon input from HTL and looking at market conditions, the assumption was based upon the number of permits that I laid out here and that were approved by council, that the city could expect to see revenue between 1.2 and 1.8 million on a yearly basis that would go specifically to fund the city's general fund. In terms of the equity process, we had a community meeting regarding equity in early October, and through that process, we received over 40 industry representatives and community members that attended that meeting. It was also, we had a survey that we distributed and kept that window open for close to 60 days to allow members of the community as well as interested businesses to give input regarding our equity program. Some of the feedback we received, you see there, it's listed there. Don't give local permits just to residents based upon residency. Increase the local operators' local hiring percentages. Some examples, community benefit agreements, they tended to work. Some example cities do that. For example, Long Beach, and it was really encouraged that the city worked towards developing that benefits agreement. We did receive a lot of feedback that $25,000 as a one-time donation was low. And then also that directing cannabis revenue to benefit community needs is something that is encouraged, that a lot of the operators felt that they wanted to individually direct how the money is used to benefit the local community. It's important to note that the survey was completed by residents and local businesses as well as members of the cannabis industry that are located outside of Oxnard. I would say in the October community meeting, in addition to the surveys, it's about a 60-40 split where we had about 40% of the input through the participation at the workshop in early October, as well as follow-up conversations and surveys. Would be about 40% of that input came from local residents and local businesses. So with that information, we developed this comparison rubric between 2019 and 2020 so that it's clear how the program was originally designed in 2019 compared to 2020. We've really retooled this program to respond to what we heard from the community, both local community members as well as those community members, as well as those persons located outside of Oxnard. Well, a couple things I want to point out. In 2019, we recommended and council provided feedback to reserve some of the permits for local residents. In 2020, as a comparison, the report before you and for which we received input on not to necessarily reserve any of those permits for local residents. And one thing I want to really focus on is that the feedback we've been receiving and the correspondences we've been receiving is, hold back those two licenses for retailers or 3 for manufacturing for local residents. And I want to really make it clear that a couple things. One is the application procedures guidelines that have been out for community review extensively, that have been posted with our letters inviting applicants to apply for the permit. And then when they were selected to move to phase 2 as well as phase 3, which is the interview, it lays out the procedures guideline, the rubric for upon which how we're going to evaluate the applicants. So, for example, labor and employment criteria, there's reference that points will be allocated for applicants who have local management and ownership, along with qualifications as seasoned cannabis operators. So while we don't necessarily recommend holding back 2 licenses for retail, for dispensary owners that would live here locally, the evaluation criteria actually gives points and gives a methodology to differentiate local applicants from those applicants that are not residing within Oxnard. Additionally, when we go through the interview process, those will be some of the questions that we ask in terms of the labor and employment criteria, local ownership, and local management. Additionally, in 2019, the recommendation was $25,000 one-time payment. The staff report before you this evening recommends increasing that one-time payment for retail to $250,000 and testing and cultivation one-time donation of $50,000. The 2019 report recommended a 50% local hire requirement. Again, the staff report before you recommends increasing that to 75%. And really the thinking on that was that by increasing the requirement of who's hired locally, we'll be providing upward mobility through jobs, and we'll be providing revenue to families and individuals who then will be able to improve their quality of life. The other requirement was a 1% gross revenue that would be going to targeted specific programs. We did hear a lot from the community in that community meeting that there was interest in how that funds should be allocated. We're recommending that, and that would be, and I want to make a point that that's 1% of their gross revenues. That is for the equity component. There's nothing to stop selected applicants from also through the community benefit specifically donating to other entities or groups or organizations that specific business feels compelled to support. So the 1% gross revenue donation, we're recommending that go to some targeted specific programs. We evaluated a number of different opportunities. And in this report, you'll see why we landed on 1% going to a specific cause. So I think I've hit this in terms of the comparison. In addition, when an applicant would go through the Cannabis Equity Program, the Community Benefits Agreement or CBA would be required. And again, there's also the required voter tax that would go to fund just the general fund. This outlines what the one-time funds would look like based upon staff's recommendation before you at the income levels that I've laid out. And one of the items that we will be talking about in the latter part of this report will be cultivation, but it's roughly $2.2 million as one-time revenue. One of the recommendations that that staff is bringing forward for use of that $2.2 million one-time funds is, and again, it's flexible. It's not intended to go to the general fund. It's money that can be allocated as seen fit by the council. One would be the creation of a property-based improvement district, or something we call a PBID, from Elm and Yucca Streets on Saviors Road for that segment. And it's really to improve that overall area and development of some improvements to move forward renovation of that specific corridor. Additionally, it's recommended that some of the funds go to the renovation of Camino del Sol. It's known as the multi-service building. It's currently houses Colonial Library, food share, a number of after-school programs and art classes, and we are aware that the building has a fair amount of needs for renovation and upgrades to comply with state requirements. The donation of the 1% annual gross revenue, we are anticipating it'll be about $373,000, and that's again based upon some assumptions that HDL assisted us in preparing, and while at first blush you think there's a lot of money there, it's not as much as maybe had been envisioned, and for that reason, when we looked at how to program that money, at one point there was a conversation to take the funds and allocate it through those 4 different programs: a facade improvement program, business grants. The city had that program a number of years ago, as well as grant making and homeless services. But in theory, if the city took that $373,000, it would be really diluting the effectiveness of the program when we deduct out some of the administrative costs. So with that, it's the recommendation that $373,000 yearly donation monies go to fund homeless services for the next 10 years, with an understanding that we could then reevaluate that within 5 years as we see fit. For all of this, as a condition of approval on the permit, the requirement would be that the community benefits agreement is required. It would specify the terms, it would specify the requirements for how you verify compliance. It would establish the timeframes for making those donations. Some of these include, and again, these are the community benefits that are over and above the equity requirements that I've just laid out. All the applicants would be required to comply with the equity requirements, and that would get memorialized in that community benefits agreement. But on top of that, there's a requirement for a community benefits agreement, and examples of what could be achieved through that agreement would be the things I've noted there: the volunteer service and monetary donations to local nonprofits. Again, this is over and above the equity requirement. But the community benefits agreement would memorialize what the applicant is doing over and above our equity requirements. And that would get memorialized through a permit process as a condition of approval and an agreement that would be signed between the applicant and the city. And really, CBAs, as we call them, are very common in other jurisdictions to memorialize those requirements over and above what is stipulated in the city's program. In terms of the cannabis and cultivation of cannabis, in October 2018, the City Council considered land use maps, and we decided at that time that we would hold on the cannabis, the cultivation ordinance, really waiting to see how the whole cannabis process worked out, and evaluated when we were ready to jump into that market. The staff has looked at this issue. We're recommending that we move forward with the consideration of an indoor cultivation ordinance with specific requirements, and to really look robustly at the regulations to address the impacts potentially of cannabis, odor, water, energy, the sustainability, and the safety needs and goals, all related to the cultivation indoors. Multi-story grows is where it's at now. There's different standards and ways that you can capture water usage. So we're really recommending that that's something that committee provide feedback on, so that we can advance that conversation to council. Based upon HTL's 2018 market analysis, we can expect that between $224,000 and $320,000 annually, and that would again be monies that would be going specifically to the general fund. And this is the same map that the council saw in October of 2018. And you'll note a couple things. Santa Clara corridor, that was allowed for both manufacturing, distribution, as well as retail. It was sort of a multi-pronged cannabis area. Obviously, that as the point we're making here is indoor cultivation. And then these are areas as well where indoor cultivation, we would recommend consideration as well. And not necessarily outdoor grow houses, due to theft, due to the fact that you can grow a more robust product within a building. You can provide multi-floor grows and security and overall odor issues, as well as why we're recommending the indoor cultivation in these areas that you see before you. And staff's input recommendation this evening is for the committee to provide input and comments on the equity program with consideration on how to allocate the 1% cannabis equity donation, including the programs and recommended percentages. And then also to provide input on advancing the cannabis cultivation ordinance. And that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any other questions. As I mentioned, I have David McPherson from HDL on the line, and Assistant Chief Sonstegard as well.
Great. All right, thank you very much. We have a large number of speakers on this particular item, so let's begin. Our first speaker is Lisa Slaughter.
Hi, Lisa. So it looks like the call may have been rejected. I don't know if you want to try again or just continue down the list.
We could try again.
Okay. Hi, Lisa.
Yes, hi.
Hi, you have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin.
Great, thank you. My name is Lisa Slaughter. I'm an attorney practicing in the arena of cannabis regulations as well as cannabis compliance. I would like to urge the committee to consider and maintain allocating 2 licenses for local residents. As you may know, there are a majority of large cannabis corporations coming in, specifically in the area of cannabis retail. And my big concern is if foreign-owned companies dominate the ownership of cannabis retail when cannabis is made federally legal, which is probably sooner than we all think, who will ultimately not only own the California cannabis brand globally, California and Oxnard will not get the chance again to make this a homegrown industry, no pun intended. For example, by not supporting local ownership, it's an open invitation for multi-state operators to buy up Oxnard licenses. By failing to set aside some of the licenses for local ownership, the odds are, as we've seen in other cities, that in 2 years or less, Oxnard will have 8 cannabis retailers whose management and community relations policies are controlled by owners who may not even live in California. We've certainly seen this happen with retail, restaurants, and coffee shops, so why would it be any different for cannabis? When liquor licenses were first given out in California, one of the ways that it was done was by lottery. And the requirement of lottery was that you had to be a local resident. The reason being is that the government realized, or the communities, the city councils and county supervisors realized that if local residents had licenses, 2 things would happen. One is the community would be a little more accepting of a new industry in something that was highly regulated before if they knew their neighbor next door was actually the person running the store. Second, the store owner would also more likely be compliant because he knew or she knew his neighbor was looking over the shoulder when he's operating the shop. Allocating licenses to local owners has a tremendous number of benefits, both for the community and for the industry. And I would absolutely urge you to maintain allocation of 2 licenses for local residents. The second thing I will say is, again, California, there is another area in California which is called Napa Valley. We all know names like Mondavi and others in the wine industry. California now exports 2/3 of all wine to the United States. Those local names and that local brand of wine can be the same here with cannabis. And that begins by establishing a local residency requirement to be issued a cannabis retail license. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Rita Salek.
Hi, Rita. Hello?
Yes.
Hi, you're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin now.
Hello? Hello? I just want to make sure you can hear me.
We hear you. Please begin.
Thank you very much for letting me to talk. My name is Rita Tsaluk. I'm CEO of one of the companies in cannabis business that's based in Colorado, and we're also applying in Oxnard. We have 5 locations in Colorado, all retail locations, all 5 in different jurisdictions. We very heavily involved and have very close to our heart social equity program. We have social equity forum that was conducted as the first in Colorado social equity forum, and it was conducted out of our social consumption locations, the coffee joint. We know about needs for those applicants. We know about their legal challenges, real estate challenges, financial and business. We're providing them with support. We're also participating in state groups and city meetings. And we applying in different states. So we kind of understand social equity programs and challenges in every state. We reviewing reports and analysis and know that most of those programs are failed programs. So we really, first I wanted to say that we really appreciate that city is looking into it deeply and taking the time to analyze it. And we are completely on board with what the city provided right now. In regards to local employment, we actually think that 50 to 75% is not out of line at all. We employing right now in Colorado without any specific limitations by the cities, about 80% of local people in their respective communities. We would love to have local people. It helps our talent retention ratios, and we also have a Path to Success program that gives people empowerment to take on specific training programs and be evaluated every 60 days to have a clear path to management. So we just wanted to offer city our assistance if they ever need to any kind of social equity programs, including incubator and accelerator programs, and we will have independently have them if we're going to be selected for Oxnard. We will have those programs for. Thank you so much. For accessory businesses, for example, the ones who producing packages, software for cannabis, and green waste management, and other ones, and anything else that the city would like to approve. Thank you so much for letting me to talk. I appreciate you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Pat Brown.
Hi,
Hello?
Pat. Hi, we're on the cannabis item. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Yes. To begin with, I'm a 79-year-old woman living alone, and frankly, I don't really care about smoking anything. or taking any medications at all anymore, and I absolutely have to, and I only take one once a week because of that. But I'm very healthy. I don't really go for this cannabis thing. I've always known that no matter how much the city tries to make off of these people, there's going to be a lot of it, majority of it, you're not going to get any money off of it because it's all going to be secretive. And it's going to be, and that, because that's just a way of their thinking, of their operation. They don't think there's anything wrong with that. They don't think they should have to pay anything to anybody. And so if somebody wants to have a couple of plants in their garage and just for themselves and not sell it to anybody or give it to anybody, that's up to them as far as I'm concerned, you know. And if they die doing it, well, that's so be it. That was their choice. But the whole situation is that I see here is that it's going to have to be done inside, in buildings that are well filtered, air conditioning and so forth, so that no one will be able to smell anything from outside. And I also think that we need to keep it into smaller businesses instead of great, big, huge, large ones. Because the larger they get, the larger they get, the larger they get. And then they start abusing the city that they're in and disregarding rules and regulations and payments and stuff. So there's a personality to all of this. And these people who prefer this and who want to do this. So you have to take that into account, and you got to have somebody on this that's going to watch this like a hawk, okay? And because otherwise the city's going to get abused, and a lot of people are going to be using what they think is marijuana, which is in reality something totally different that's harmful. So I've been to a lot of their parties and stuff that people have had, and when I was young, and I would say no to the whole thing if I could, but you're going to have to control it very, very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Violeta Aguilar Warwick.
Is full and cannot accept new messages at this time. Please try again later.
Chair, do you want me to try again?
Yes, one last time.
Hi, Violeta.
Yes. Hi.
Oh, hi. You are live in the committee meeting. We're on the cannabis item. You have 3 minutes. Please begin now.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Violeta Aguilar Wyrick, and I'm community liaison for Catalyst Cannabis. And we agree with feedback that the initial social equity program as provided by Oxnard City Council in 2019 was inadequate. Thus, rather than proposing a 1% of gross revenue donation to local charities, we propose as part of our application a 2% donation. As a result, we can be supportive of a one-time payment into the Social Equities Fund of $250,000. However, we would prefer that this be taken as a revenue percentage. We believe this embodies better the public-private partnership that we envision with the City of Oxnard. With respect to the 75% local hire requirement, we are prepared to support and take all appropriate steps to fulfill and exceed this requirement. This component, as we ramp up to the local workforce, should be measured as best efforts. We are ready to leverage partnerships to host job fairs and to do other local outreach to meet this important economic development component of the social equity program. And finally, from our perspective, a missing component in the current proposal that we would urge council to consider is additional bonus points for operators that have a collective bargaining agreement. We are committed to be a good partner, a good corporate citizen for the city of Oxnard, and we are committed to bringing in good jobs, livable wage jobs, union jobs. This is not only good for our company, this is the mission that we have, but it's also good for the overall community. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker we have is Jim Gilmer, to be followed by Rodney Medina.
Hi, Jim.
Hello?
You're live in the committee meeting. We have 3 minutes for you to address the committee on cannabis. Please begin.
Great, thank you very much. Jim Gilmore, Oxnard resident, Oxnard community advocate, and I would like to begin by first saying that it is imperative that the committee continue to support, not eliminate, the local residency requirement that a minimum of 2 licenses be reserved for Oxnard residents. And primarily Oxnard residents, because the cannabis industry, and we've even heard from some of the callers tonight, the industry is less than 3% people of color and women. That's the bottom line. If you look at Los Angeles County's social equity program, which basically got derailed and suspended because companies were coming in, large cannabis companies, and basically putting people of color on their applications because they required 51% be, people of color or women or ex-felons. And they were just basically putting names on facades, and the people had no organizational empowerment, no equity ownership in the companies. It was just used for the application process. I'm very concerned that this industry, we are living in a time of racial and social equity, and Oxnard is a minority, majority, people of color dominant city. I believe that the applicants in the pool will be representative of, people of color and women. And that's one of the criteria that must stay in. Just having an evaluation process that includes some of the dialogue is too subjective. Be firm with it. Let's, be very firm with this. Make it a permanent record and fact and stipulation and criteria for this process, because the last thing that I would want, and I'm involved with this as an advocate and have organized local folks to support this, largely because of some of the things the staff has outlined to better their community. And as a veteran, the VA has endorsed cannabis as opposed to having heavy doses of opioids and other substances for veterans. There's a lot of medicinal research that is taking place within the cannabis industry. All these things can be incorporated, even involving Oxnard Community College and Cal State Channel Islands on the research part of this. If you have local people, that's how we think. We want to involve the whole city. So the last thing I want to mention in my 30 seconds is the taxation of 4% is pretty much double what other cities have. Not opposing that, but to have another $250,000 is somewhat exorbitant. Most of the companies are going to give back to the community, particularly if they're local residents. Please keep that requirement in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Rodney Medina, to be followed by Zach McKinnon.
Hi, Rodney.
Yes, this is Rodney.
Hi, you're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin now.
Thank you. My name is Rodney Medina, and I'm a local Oxnard resident and a cannabis advocate. I've heard much tonight about supporting our local citizens with the ADU discussion, which is, we all know, primarily the minority community. So what about supporting the local minority cannabis business community? Having worked locally, regionally, and internationally in cannabis education, I've seen firsthand how minorities are being left out of the new business opportunities that cannabis has provided. And after reviewing the proposed cannabis equity program, I can clearly say that it misses the mark completely of what a community-conscious social equity component to cannabis legality is supposed to be. When I first presented the concept of social equity to the Oxnard Planning Commission and then to this body in April of 2019, it was with the specific intention of promoting a well-intentioned social equity program for the Oxnard cannabis business community. To say that I'm disappointed in the planning and sustainability manager and the consultants who put this together would be an understatement. The whitewashing began when they rebranded social equity with local equity, which helped you assert the responsibilities of a well-intentioned program that truly benefits the local minority cannabis business community. The intent of a social equity component is to maximize the ability for communities of color, which Oxnard is, that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, which Oxnard was, to benefit from the new industry as owners, investors, managers, and employees, not only employees as your ordinance proposes. A well-intentioned social equity ordinance should specifically provide priority licensing, access to capital, and technical assistance for confirmed equity applicants, as well as general applicants incubating a cannabis business owned by an equity applicant. These ordinances are meant to level the playing field. Your ordinance is suggesting that local equity business applicants should pack up their bags and find another field to play in. This is the wrong message to send to what is supposed to be a compassionate business that is cannabis. Instead of Oxnard being a beacon of cannabis social equity like I had proposed last year, you've gone down the path of greed and social irresponsibility that continues to plague the cannabis industry across the country.
30 seconds.
I went to that workshop, and there was not 40% representation of the local business community. Therefore, how can you begin to think that you've addressed the issue of social equity when those who've been affected by prohibition the most do not have a seat at the table? I suggest you hold an additional workshop or workshops where feedback from the local business community is represented, not big money cannabis outsiders, to discuss what a true social equity component is supposed to be and what it should look like. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Zach McKinnon to be followed by Pastor Calvin Harrison.
Hi, Zach.
Hi.
Hi. You're in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin.
My thoughts on the cannabis program, I would just have to summarize that the cannabis equity programs in the communities I'm a part of have given back to the communities in a way that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. And when we think about cannabis and putting it in our cities, we need to think about how we want those funds to play out in our communities, and the people we're bringing in, how they hope to give back into our communities when they're legalizing their shops in our areas. So that's all I really had to say on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Pastor Calvin Harrison to be followed by Marissa Lopez.
Five, 2, 3, 6, 9.
Okay. Let's try the pastor one last time.
Okay.
5, 2, 3, 6.
Okay, Marissa Lopez to be followed by Robert Garcia.
Hi, Marissa.
Yeah.
Hi, you're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin now.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Councilman Madrigal, Councilwoman Basua, Mayor Flynn, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the proposed changes to the Cannabis Social Equity Program. I appreciate your time invested into planning and wholeheartedly support a 75% plus local hire with good union jobs. My name is Marissa Lopez, and I was born and raised in Oxnard, and I currently own and manage property in Oxnard and have long worked with nonprofits for the past 20 years. I am one of the local applicants for the cannabis retail license. After thoroughly reading the report, I'm flabbergasted by the complete reversal of including social equity into the program. As it's proposed, it completely rewrites what a cannabis social equity program is supposed to be, a program to support equal access to the cannabis industry, especially for people of color who have been disproportionately affected when cannabis was illegal. The new proposal essentially asserts that local hiring rather than local ownership is enough and will de facto send the bulk of cannabis profits out of our community. Instead of adding more teeth to a strong social equity program, you propose to completely cut the meager 2 out of 8 places reserved for qualified, keyword qualified local applicants. You propose to increase the one-time fee requirement from $25,000 to a prohibitive $250,000. And third, you propose changing the 1% yearly donation to local charities to the city's homeless services program. Making these changes to the application process rules and regulations while we are in the 3rd phase of the application process does a disservice to our local business owners and nonprofits. While I don't agree with the proposed changes, I feel if changes are to be made, a proper series of workshops must be held to gather community input. And these changes should be made for the following round of proposed applicants and not the current round of applications. I understand the basis for these changes were made because of the October 2019 workshop and survey, which was mostly attended by out-of-state cannabis corporations. The following statements, don't give local permits to applicants based on residents and local residents will fail, is a prime example of their out-of-touch comments and honestly quite insulting. There are several businesses with cannabis experience, most notably the once largest cannabis operator in the U.S., MedMen, that failed because they neglected to understand their local demographic, could not conform to the new regulatory environment, or made assumptions based on past success. Local cannabis business owners have spent years getting prepared to engage in the legal cannabis market, and to assert failure is imminent is offensive.
30 seconds.
Asking for $250,000 instead of $25,000 in the middle of the application process may be prohibitive to some otherwise qualified applicants. We have already invested a substantial amount based on the existing requirements that we all signed up for. Being that our community out of community investors have no problem with that one-time fee of $250,000, if it should be added at this time, it should be added to those outside corporations or added over a series of 5 years instead of an upfront one-time fee. Third, as a responsible business owner, I understand the need for and plan for this local 4 to 6% additional cannabis tax, which will go into the city's general fund. I appreciate your time, and I hope that we do not do a disservice by moving the 1% tax, 1% from community nonprofits to the city's programs. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Robert Garcia to be followed by Sienna Marie Sesma.
Five, 2, 3, 6, 1.
Try Mr. Garcia one last time, please.
5, 2, 3, 6, 1.
Okay, Sienna Marie Sesma to be followed by Vanessa.
Hi, Sienna.
Yes.
Hi, you're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin now.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the city staff and council and members, the committee, and everybody who's been putting together a great plan and great work. And I know that there is a lot of confusion, and I appreciate the clarification of Ms. Mallory's presentation earlier. As a Ventura County resident and business owner, and a person who cares immensely for our local community and all of our residents, I have been paying attention to the developments in our growing local commercial cannabis and hemp industries. The promising economic growth is very exciting. However, it's only exciting if this opportunity for growth benefits our county residents directly. Large corporate or limited liability companies are going from town to town in California and across the country, hunting these opportunities to acquire cannabis licenses to make huge money from communities while squelching opportunities for local residents. I have been so glad to see that the city of Oxnard has built into the application processes for cannabis licenses that holding of a portion of permits for local residents, which will ensure that not all are taken by big pharma type businesses. I'm in strong support of keeping the reserve of permits for local residents as it was set forth in 2019 and supported by the City Council, to both ensure that our community grows with the cannabis market and to keep this commitment that was made to our local community. The application processes are well underway, with applicants currently in phase 3 for dispensaries, including the local applicants who applied with this confidence and support of the local equity promise. These operators, applicants, are strong business owners with extensive business backgrounds, deep vested interest into our communities, owning homes, having the children go to school, years and years and decades of business experience, and have contributed intensely and immensely to our existing community. Though their experience might not be in the cannabis realm, please keep in mind that cannabis has only been legal for a short period of time, and operators that claim that they have 30 and 40 years of experience would also be claiming that they were in the illegal side of the industry. Please keep that in mind. So many of us have been greatly anticipating the further development of the Oxnard Cannabis Equity Program and continue to look forward to how this program will serve our local community in both local and social equity. The consideration on the table today to remove the hold of permits for local residents would be a grave step backwards and to create complications between our community and the city of Oxnard. Please keep the hold for local permits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Vanessa to be followed by Jesus Torres.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hello. Hi, yes, thank you.
You're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. I want to thank all of you and city staff for all of your hard work. This has definitely been a process. As my team and I support the efforts being made by the city of Oxnard to create a prosperous cannabis space, we want to ensure locals are included. From the beginning, Oxnard city staff recommended support of local applicants, but there was great concern that this opportunity would only benefit those big out-of-town businesses and locals couldn't compete with their deep pockets. Council and city staff assured everyone that this process would be fair and would include local permit holders. Since July 2019, the city and HDL set forth the application fees, donation of $25,000, and introduced the detailed cannabis application. $25,000 was what the staff recommended and what city council approved. To increase this fee to $250,000 would be challenging, as many of our locals are faced with reduced income due to COVID. Many of these mom and pops don't have 5 or 6 cannabis stores. This would be their first store. To change the fees as we are entering phase 3 is one way to clearly eliminate our local residents. As we must pay to play, each phase provide 1% annual give and now 250,000 donations. Mind you, just to participate through 4 phases is close to 20,000. I'm recommending you increase the 250,000 to the next round of applicants, not those currently in the process. Another big concern is the donation of 1% gross sales, which was to assist local organizations and nonprofits. Application guidelines state to be donated to the local charities of choice. There are many small grassroots organizations like La Hermandad, Líderes Campesinas, or even OPD Drag who are quietly serving the community who could use these funds. As depression and suicide rates increase, please allow donation of choice. These are children and families who could really use their support. I appreciate beautifying Oxnard and building facades, but we need to take care of the people first. City of Oxnard quality of life strategy is to build relationships and create opportunities. Well, this is an opportunity for many of our community to be business owners, to have secure employment regardless of the current situation of this pandemic, and to allow them to support the families and community of Oxnard. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesus Torres.
Hello.
Hi, Jesus. You're live in the committee meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin now.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Jesus Torres, and I'm speaking on behalf of Social Equity Oxnard, a local task force made up of local individuals in various roles in the industry. We submitted a letter for this hearing for the record. I'd like to focus my comments on 2 points. First, the intended point of social equity is to level the playing field for all applicants so that under-resourced applicants have a fair shot at earning a license. Staff call these potential applicants problematic in their staff report. What's problematic is that the city is proposing to turn its back on social equity and let the market dictate who gets a license. The fact is the market is dominated by large private equity backing, private investor corporations with infinite resources. All we're asking is for the city to see the value of bringing equity to this marketplace. Second, the city is facing budget pressures. We get it. However, the 1% and the one-time cash payment revenue should not be used for city initiatives that can otherwise be funded with general funds. These funds were originally allocated for social equity initiatives. Staff is proposing to eliminate social equity, but still collect social equity funds for city programs. Our recommendation is to use cannabis tax dollars going into the general fund to fund general fund expenditures. The one-time cash payment and the 1% of funds must be used for true social equity initiatives. I suggest staff to conduct another public workshop that is truly representative of the community. We engage in the process of building a social equity component focused on helping local applicants become operators, not just employees. This is about turning generational poverty into generational wealth for local residents. I want to see Oxnard meet the moment we are in today, and this proposal does not. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will try Pastor Calvin Harrison one more time.
Hi, Calvin.
Yes, this is Calvin. How you doing?
Good. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee on the cannabis item. Please begin.
Yes, good evening, City Councilman, Mayor Tim Flynn. Basically, I just want to let you guys know as far as I'm opposing the elimination of the local residents as required for the Oxnard cannabis license. I'm in support of the local equity in all cannabis licenses for Oxnard. Also, I support the local residents as a property to receive licensing, particularly due to the fact that people of color and women are immensely underrepresented in this industry. Also, we definitely don't want to, to give this industry to the, the big corporates, companies that can come in and take over. We definitely want to be able to give back to Oxnard and keep everything in Oxnard, if possible, where we can kind of get the community involved with jobs, different things that'll support Oxnard. A lot of companies come here and make a lot of money, and then they leave, and then we just kind of left hanging as Oxnard. So we definitely want to try to keep everything local, and make sure that we get what we deserve as far as the support from the city to keep the cannabis here locally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And I believe that's the end of the speakers.
Correct.
Okay, moving on then with committee member comments. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I listened intently with the speakers, and it is quite interesting that at the council level that it's not often that we have discussions about social equity, and I haven't actually even had an opportunity to comment on it. And I believe that we have a lot of people in our community that need to be empowered. And if I really thought that awarding one group or one person or one gender or one group, that was really going to do a lot to empower the community at large, because I am concerned about individual empowerment, but I'm even more concerned about empowering the community and empowering as many people as we possibly can. And I think that should be the objective: empowering women, empowering men, empowering minorities, all the things that were said. But people are going to disagree on how best to accomplish that. I think most importantly that we want to try in this city to be as inclusive, not exclusive, but we want to be as inclusive as we possibly can. And what does that mean? And I just want to finish on that social equity comment. I think it means a lot of things. I mean, I think we want to try to empower as many people as possible. I don't think the application process is going to allow us to completely do that, but ideally, we would have workers that are going to be empowered because they're getting good good wages. So I like the idea of a community benefits agreement. Workers are going to get paid well. That's empowerment. Empowering more women business owners and encouraging more women to open up businesses. That's a form of empowerment. More minorities of people of all groups. And so I support that. And I don't know how best to achieve that. But that's at least my stated goal. I think we need to empower as many people as we possibly can. The second thing here is I like the fact that 2 out of the 8 are reserved locally. But the question has been raised to me, what happens if we can't find 2 out of the 8 that really meet all the qualifications? Well, there's a lot of money here we're talking about here. And we hear that in the voices of those applicants. I mean, money makes the world turn. This is about money. I mean, come on, let's not try to fool ourselves. This is about money, and it's about big money. And we want to try to keep that money as local as we possibly can. We want the multiplier effect, and we want that money that if the businesses are operating in Oxnard, we want hopefully the people are living in Oxnard. They're sending their kids to schools here in Oxnard. They're empowering the community. They're using their business wealth and their let's just say entrepreneurship to really benefit the whole community. So I want to say that of the suggestions that were given to us tonight about, I guess it was the 2019 versus 2020. I'm wondering if those could be put up again just for a second, please. I just wanted to march through those and talk about them. I mean, finishing that concept of the local hire, local businesses, I think it's important if, we're talking about that for housing, we're talking about that for job creation, we're talking about it for a lot of things. I don't see why we wouldn't be consistent with that about trying to make sure that local people are part of this process. That's empowerment, no question about it. So when I see all of this, one of the things that I just heard of all the things that I heard was this, the either increased amounts for retail, that maybe some of those organizations wouldn't have that increased amount. It kind of reminds me of people looking for a down payment for a home, that maybe they have the income to buy a home, but they don't have the down payment. So I'm a little bit sensitive to that. But one of the things that I like about 2019 is reserve some permits for local residents, unless for whatever reason, and I don't think that's the case, we can't find two for whatever reason that are meeting that criteria. But I don't know, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, but I'm more than certain we have two qualified residents. So I really like that. I like everything else about 2020. It says increased one-time payment amount for retail testing and cultivation. But I'm wondering if we might be able to work out some kind of deal where instead of them paying an upfront fee of $250,000, maybe it's 2% of gross sales or 3%, whatever that amount is, over a term until they can afford to pay that. So that was one of the changes I was thinking about. I really like the local hire. It says up to 75%. I like where it says up to 75%, but maybe it's 50 to 75%. And then finally, as far as the gross revenue targeted to specific programs, I really like that idea. But one of the things that has happened in the past, I think it was 368,000 or somewhere around there. But one of the things that has happened in the past is when we target specific programs, it's usually kind of an open competition. We end up spending, the arts come to mind. We end up spending more time talking about how to spend that $300,000 or $400,000 than we do our own city budget of almost $500 million. So there's something not really right. There's something not right about that, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua. So I like the idea of the 1% of gross revenue targeted at specific programs, but I think we somehow have to find a mechanism. Maybe it's rotating and we spread the wealth. And again, it's kind of like broadening empowerment. That's maybe the word I was looking for. We need to broaden empowerment. We need to continue to include more people that we can empower in every single way we can. So that's all I have to say about this. And I'm hoping that most importantly, we can get these operations up and running because we need the revenue. We could say jokingly, the recipients, the people that are going to shop there, it's obvious that they have a desire to buy the products. I don't want to say they absolutely need it. There are people who have medical marijuana needs. I understand that. So I'm looking to, more than anything else, to let's get these businesses up and running as soon as we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Committee Member Basua.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Basua.
Thank you. I want to thank the speakers for calling in today. I'm going to go, if you can just go ahead and leave that slide up, that would be great. I'm just going to go through those points there. In regards to the permits, I would like to keep the permits for local residents still. And I don't know if we can do, for example, if we have 8 and 2 of them are for local residents, if they don't get, if we have no one that qualifies, maybe at that point we can choose somebody else, but I would still like that preference for our residents. The increase of a one-time payment amount, I understand that probably is a little bit high, especially if we have first-time mom and pop shops that are going to be applying, and And maybe we can do something as far as like what the mayor said, have them do the one-time payment um, based on profit. Um, but if that's not possible, if it's too complicated, I'm okay with the increase there. And in regards to the local hire, I totally agree. Up to 75% sounds correct. My only suggestion with the 1% gross revenue funds is that nothing against homeless, and I know that the money is really needed, but during this COVID epidemic and being a parent, I've seen the struggles that the youth has, and I don't think that we as a community are investing enough in our youth. And I see parents struggling to go online with their children, parents unable to help their children. And I just think that it's time for Oxnard to start investing in the next generation. Um, and I would like to see some cannabis money go towards that. And that's, again, that's my opinion. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I kind of want to echo the same sentiments as my colleagues. I totally agree with the first item that we do need to reserve some permits for local residents. I understand the power of the job aspect, the local hire requirement, but at the same time, you know, that's like saying, yes, you can work here, but you can't be the boss. And I truly do feel that, you know, although, you know, I may not, you know, be that person in general, you know, and there may be more people like me who, you know, don't have the qualifications to own a business in cannabis. That does not mean that that speaks for the entire city. I believe that we do have local residents that are able and capable of leading this particular type of business and being quite successful. And at the end of the day, they understand the everyday struggles of life here in this area, in Oxnard or in general. They may not have experienced it, you know, like, you know, the next person, or everyone has a completely little bit different story, but they understand and comprehend that particular struggle. So to remove um, the local resident aspect of it um, would be a mistake by the city, because that income will go flying away as quickly as it comes in. Again, the second aspect, sorry, as far as the one-time payment, I do kind of agree with the mayor. If it's too much for a particular business or group, then, you know, then we should probably um, have them pay over a particular time, or find some creative way for them to be successful. I'm sure that at the committee level, or the group meeting that was had in October, the businesses said that they were hire up to 75%, but only with the condition of the local residents gaining one of the permits was revoked. So I know that it'll come back to that 50-75 criteria, which I know will come back. And as far as the 1%, I completely agree with what Councilwoman Basua said. Um, you do see the daily struggle of not only parents, but children. It's difficult. It's the social aspect of, once this pandemic is over, you will see the social issues that this pandemic caused in our youth. It's difficult because socially their growth probably has been stunted for years. And, you know, at the end of the day, I know, as many have said, this is big money. This is a large increase. You know, generates money on the business side. Yes, the city will get some of that revenue, but at the end of the day, this is big business. And if if there's such a drive for particular businesses to come in and succeed, you have big companies from all over the U.S. wanting to come here to Oxnard because they see that they could be quite successful. If that's the case, then maybe we as a council need to start talking about increasing increasing the number of permits we hand out instead of just giving those 6 to 8 permits. Then maybe we should increase that. We need to find some creative way to help out our residents, not only in having a good job, but in actually being able to have their own business. And I think this would be a great opportunity to do that. Let's see, anything else that I might be missing? I think that should pretty much cover it. I completely understand the homeless aspect of this, but at the same time, we do have other needs, and we have other groups, for example, the youth, who really do deserve this. And I know over the last couple of years, we as a council have kind of done them a disservice by cutting a lot of their by cutting not only from the youth but also from seniors. So maybe we should take a look at senior services for some of this funding. So that thank you. Mayor, do you have something to say?
Yes, I do. I just want to say I'm very inspired by both of my colleagues on this committee. I think Councilwoman and committee member Basua starting off the conversation about youth, and you, Mr. Chair, being a high school teacher, talking about the effects of COVID-19 on youth. I have 2 college-age daughters here at home. I see how they've been impacted by this. I think you're absolutely correct, Mr. Chair. I think the effects of this are going to go on for many years. I mean, I don't think it's not necessarily devastation for youth, but I think youth. I was speaking about empowerment, and I just am very inspired by both of my colleagues on this committee by this renewed discussion and focus on youth. And I think if, depending on circumstances in the financial future of the city, it makes me feel not homesick, but remiss and kind of left out of how to best allocate new resources if we get them to empowerment of youth. And that I think at future discussions, and I might be able to contribute that in other ways, that future discussions should be more and more in this community about younger people and how and today it happened to be this issue that kind of brought it out in me because of both of you. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I want to again thank both of my colleagues for this. I think this has been somewhat productive. Staff, have you gotten enough of some sort of direction or anything else that we need to do in our part?
Chair Madrigal, thank you very much for the direction. It was very useful to hear from what what we heard from the community in 2019 to what's been heard today, and we'll be able to bring this back to council. But the one aspect we have not heard from the committee members on yet is the cultivation question. If that's something that the committee would recommend that staff continue to work on those ordinances. That was the second recommendation within the report. So if we can have the various committee members give input on that, we would appreciate it.
Okay, sounds good. Mayor, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I thank you very much, Ms. Golden and Mr. Chair. In fact, I've been asked just as much over time about cultivation as I have about when are these retail outlets going to open. And I don't think that that cultivation or marijuana cultivation is going to overtake strawberries. And if it does, that creates another set of circumstances. But I think we need to explore this further. I do hear a lot of concern of the residents. One of the things, Mr. Chair, that I expressed a concern about, and I forgot to tie this in, is that one of the things that one of the few things that I'm concerned about this new state law and our implementation of this new state law is that I just said that I think it's going to make this particular drug more accessible to younger people, even under the age of 18. And I think that if we can proceed with cultivation and/or a discussion about cultivation where it's not going to enhance the possibility that minors are going to get this in their hands. I don't know how that, I mean, I know that there are ways to safeguard against that, but if it makes it more likely that minors are going to get this in their hands, then I have real reservations about it, but I would like to encourage the staff to move forward on this. You know, the city manager, I believe, and I think the members of the council, Mr. Chair, are doing everything we possibly can to increase revenues in this city so we don't have to rely on sales tax increases and this kind of thing. We're looking for additional revenue, and we don't want to sell our city out. We don't want to sell our fundamental values out in any way. But again, this is legalized. The voters have spoken very loudly about this. So I don't have specific recommendations, Ms. Golden and Mr. Chair, about agriculture other than the fact that we need to proceed with those efforts. But I ultimately have a real concern about the youth of this community, which is what tying everything together. And as former Governor Jerry Brown once said, he said, you know, we're looking to become the most competitive economy, not only in the United States, but in the world. And I'm not sure it's going to add to our competitive edge if everybody's getting high all the time. So anyway, that's just an ending quote of former Governor Brown.
Thank you, Councilwoman Basua.
Cultivation. I'm not a fan, nor I don't think I'm going to support cultivation in the outdoors. Just seeing what happened in Carpinteria and even on the county side with hemp being grown. I don't want to see cultivation outdoors. Definitely, I could support indoor cultivation as long, again, as you know the ordinance and there are restrictions and there's other aspects that are going to be put into the cultivation to assure that the community isn't smelling the cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, I've seen, and I know it is possible, that it's a great way to actually cultivate an indoor area. And I know that it is possible for those particular buildings that do cultivate to not be marked as one. So I am all for the indoor cultivation. I know city staff specifically had an area way in the south end of Oxnard, south of Wainimi Road, and then also down in the McInnes Ranch and Sakioka area. So yeah, those would be great places. And even down at the Rose Santa Clara corridor, you have that industrial, you have those industrial buildings, and it would actually be a great area that I know could be secured easily, and it is doable for businesses to cultivate there. And I feel that in peace, where you won't get complaints about odor or people trying to get into those particular buildings. So I'm okay with the cultivation map from October 2018.
Thank you, Chair. That was very helpful. And that would conclude the items that staff was seeking your feedback on this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now moving on to item E, items for future agendas. Mayor?
Mr. Chair, I'm hesitant. I did ask I had a request in the Public Works Committee today, but I'm hesitant to ask for any further requests until we're able to review the list and the priorities and see as a committee if they still hold the same importance.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Basua?
No request at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have no request at this time. With that being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.